What's up guys, welcome back to DCA. So what we're going to do in this video is take a look at Bitcoin, and we're going to investigate supply chain dynamics for Bitcoin because we've been looking at these for months now. And these metrics have been exceptional at identifying for us multiple things, but primarily it can be thought of in two categories. And we're going to look at both of these things today. So the first thing that it shows us is where has the selling been coming from that we've been experiencing ever since we hit this high in November, right around here, around the first or second week of November when we topped out at around 69K. Because this is going to tell us, is the selling that we're experiencing right now, is it coming from short-term holders, people that have bought, they kind of bought the top, and now they're capitulating, which is to entirely be expected in the setting of a bear market when we're seeing that these people either thought that the price was going to keep going up to some of these ridiculous valuations that people were talking about on YouTube and Twitter, 150K, 200K, 300K, and quite frankly, a lot of people saying much higher prices than that. Or is the selling coming from old hands, people that have been holding their Bitcoin for years now, people that have been holding for 4 years, 5 years plus, all right? And so there is a way that we can do that. And that is because of the open ledger. So we can go and look at the on-chain metrics and actually identify where is the selling coming from. Because what we expect to see in a bear market, and you see this every bear market, is that you're going to get capitulation from people that sort of bought up in these ranges up here, all right? So people that bought during the bull market. And that's kind of why we always talk about on the channel, not buying into the crypto market during the bull market, or at least trying to avoid it as best as possible, because you want to be buying into the crypto market during the bear market. And quite frankly, if you take a look at all the metrics, that is when no one else is really participating in the network. Everyone's out of the network, and we're talking about Bitcoin as well as altcoins if you're someone who's not into buying Bitcoin. But that doesn't matter, because this metric right here that we'll be looking at can sort of be used for a proxy for the entire cryptocurrency market, because the network activity on Bitcoin and Ethereum, they tend to be the most robust. Now, at some point in the future, that could change. Bitcoin may not be the dominant force that it is now, but until that time, we're going to use Bitcoin as a proxy to gauge the health of the cryptocurrency market, because we have the most detailed information on Bitcoin. We have, the most in-depth statistics into Bitcoin, into the network, and see exactly what's happening. We can't do that to such a degree with a lot of other networks. So until that time, we're going to continue using Bitcoin in this regard. Now, what we're going to do today specifically is take a look at the selling on the Bitcoin network that has occurred since we've started this slide from our all-time high over here in November, okay? So what we're looking at is this graph on the horizontal axis, which shows us, if you look up here at 68,000, right at that point, this is the number of Bitcoin that have been sold since being moved last at 68K, all right? And the reason that that is important is because this can show us at each individual price where the selling is coming from. So rather than focusing in on any individual number, we're going to look at this in relative terms in order to identify, is the selling coming from old hands, or is the selling coming from people who, like we said, bought at this point in the bull market, which is what we expect to see. That's a normal occurrence inside of a bear market. All right. Once you get into the bearish phase of the market, these people start to capitulate, because a lot of them are retail investors who came in. They're sort of less experienced in general. They come into the network, and when the price starts crashing on them, which it always does, they get caught off guard and they capitulate. They panic sell. Now, what we're going to compare that to then would be people that bought, at some point prior to this bull run really getting kicked off, all the way back in time through Bitcoin's history. So, we can go all the way back until the price was, less than $500, all right? So we're looking in relative terms then, has it come from people who bought up here, or has it come from people who bought down here, all right? And like I said, we're not going to look at specific prices. So, each individual price level that we're looking at here, as we go down, it corresponds to a price. And that just indicates that the selling is coming from that level. So you'll see that there's lots of selling coming from the 60Ks. There's a whole bunch of selling coming from, in the 30Ks, 40Ks, 50Ks, all the way up. But a lot of it's coming from the 60K range. And so these are people that are capitulating that bought actually all the way up at the top. All right. So you just see a huge number of coins that people that bought the absolute top are, very close to it. So we're looking at only coins above 60K here. And you'll see that far and away, the largest amounts of capitulation are coming from these ranges up here. All right. Now, what we wouldn't want to see, on the other hand, is huge amounts of selling coming from people who bought their coins last at under 20K. All right. Because that would indicate that these are people who've been holding, maybe they've been holding since 500 or a couple thousand, all right, or 10,000, whatever it may be. These have been people that have been holding for an extended period of time. And, if we started to see them dumping, that would indicate a loss of faith in the network. And so the first number that you see is this. And we see that the net position change of the people who purchased prior to, anytime prior to December of 2020, really, because we're just simply looking at, coins that were purchased for around $19,500 or less. So we're looking at all the coins bought in history prior to December of 2020. And we see that the selling that has occurred during this bear market. So we're counting the bear market for the purposes of this analysis. The bear market counts as any time after right here, the selling that has occurred during this time frame. So from November until today, right? So if someone sold the coin after November of 2021, where was it that they bought that coin at? What we can see is that there have been 1.28 million coins sold that come prior to December of 2020. Okay. So when we just compare, the number of coins down here, right in this range that, were purchased at 18K, 16K, 10K, 8K, all the way down to 500 or less, which is this category right here. There have been, a fair number of coins accounting for around 6.7% of the Bitcoin supply. But when we compare to the amount of selling that's taken place up here, it pales in comparison. And let's take a look at that. So we see that there have actually been 3.55 million coins sold up in this range. All right. And that accounts for around 18.6% of the Bitcoin supply. So what we're getting at is the vast majority of selling going on the Bitcoin network is coming from the usual suspects. We're getting the selling coming from these guys up here that bought at 60K, that, they're listening to, the Bitcoin Moon Boys, all the big channels on YouTube telling you, buy in now, the price is going to 100K, as we were dipping down to 52K, that's max pain. As we're down here at 48K, buy in now because we're going to the moon. And so, we said on the channel that once we started getting below the 50K level, that's a really bad sign. And historically, when we see ourselves cross these critical price levels, you're typically at the point of no return. And so we said, once you go below the 20 week, you typically see us go to the 50 week. Once you go to the 50, you typically go to the 100. And unfortunately, once you're below the 100 week moving average, you typically head down to the 200 week moving average. And that is exactly how it's played out. So there have been absolutely no surprises in this market cycle so far. In fact, we were even making videos talking about the fact that the realized price of the network, our realized price has kind of been doing something like this. And we've been talking about this for some time. And sure enough, that's exactly what we've seen. And we have come down and now eventually below the realized price. And the realized price, if you need a refresher, is simply the point at which the average coin is held on the Bitcoin network. And historically, we see that as the bear market continues, we typically come below that realized price, right? And once we're below that realized price, that's usually an indication that the market is gearing up for some type of consolidation period where all the Bitcoin tourists are out of the network. And we've seen that right here. These are our tourists, right? These guys are just the tourists, and they are now, by and large, they're out of the network. And that's what you need to see. You need a flushing out of the people who bought at the top, who bought in this range. And that's exactly what you're seeing here, to the tune of nearly 20% of the Bitcoin supply. These guys have been eliminated, right? And these guys selling if we just come back and look at this 1.3 million Bitcoin approximately, this is business as usual. We're always seeing these guys are always taking some profits, because you have to imagine they are hugely in profit, especially when you look down at some of the guys that bought down here at like 4K, some of the guys that bought way back here at 500. These guys are massively in profit. So they would be fools not to take some sort of schedule profit. And that's what they do. You'll see that a lot of these coins that are 10 years or older, they sell a couple thousand, every week or every month. And so they're just living off of the returns that Bitcoin has afforded them because they happen to get in right at the beginning. And so you're constantly seeing a lot of that. And these guys have a huge number of coins, all right? There's no two ways about it. So ultimately, if these guys started dumping Bitcoin, and, when I say these guys, really we're talking about if these guys started dumping Bitcoin, the guys who bought in at 10, at 100, at 200, 300, all right? If they started dumping in mass, that would be bad, but that's not what we're seeing. So we're seeing that all the dumping that we're seeing is coming from up in these ranges, specifically right in this range here. So right in this 60K range, we're just seeing a huge number of coins being sold right in that range. We're seeing that a lot of the selling is coming right in there. So you are seeing a fair amount of selling here, but a huge number of it is coming from people that bought the absolute top and now they're trying to get out. All right. So the next thing we're going to quickly come and look at is this. So we just talked about where is the selling coming from. All right. So we know the selling is primarily coming from the guys who are buying up here in the 60Ks. But now let's take a look at where is the buying coming from. Okay. And this can sort of be stratified into a few levels. So you see that, up here, and again, we're going to talk in relative terms, and then I'll sort of apply some numbers to these rather than trying to look at an individual level, at an individual price and the number of Bitcoin at that price, because that doesn't matter. So first things first, you'll see that there is a lot of buying, you may notice, right in here. Okay. We've basically been below 23K now for around 26 days. So not very long at all. We've been down below that level for about 26 days. All right. And then we have another range here, right? You'll see that basically from around 30K, right in this 30K range up to 48K, you have a much larger number of days. So, we could basically say that we spent a significant amount of time kind of right in this range here. Just a huge number of days that we spent trading around this, anywhere from 46 down to around 30K plus or minus. And so we want to know the holders of Bitcoin, where have they been acquiring at during this time? Where have the new holders come in? At what price levels have they come in? Okay. And so we're going to break this down and we're going to look at this in terms of multiple different price levels and where are these holders at? So the first thing that we can see is from this lowest level down here at around 19K, realistically down to around 17K, up to maybe right around here, right? We actually have a huge number of Bitcoin there, and that's about 1.88 million Bitcoin. So 1.88 million Bitcoin have been acquired right in this range, okay? So 1.88 million. So that's a fair amount, but I want to put a caveat with that. So we have been showing that, acquisition of Bitcoin has been reaching new all-time highs in terms of the amount of wallets being created acquiring Bitcoin. All right. That's definitely true. But you should also note that in spite of a huge number of Bitcoin being acquired in this range in a short number of days, we always see a huge number of Bitcoin being acquired in a short number of days because of the fact that short-term day trader types tend to be the highest volume on any given day. So while there is certainly a lot of acquisition going on at this price, at least some of this is going to be short-term traders, all right? At least a fair portion of this, specifically anytime you're at a given price level. So right now you can see that we're sitting right at around 21,000 to 22,000. So at least a fair amount of daily Bitcoin volume will be coming from that segment of the population, right? Technically, there's 1.88 million Bitcoin that have been acquired right here, but not all of that can be attributed to people that are buying into the network to hold it. Some of it is going to be people that are more short-term traders. Okay, now a second segment that you can see are coins that were last moved on the network right in this range here. Okay, so we're talking 25 up to around 27K. Now what's interesting is if you look at this metric here, you can see that we didn't spend really any time in that range, almost none. Almost no time was spent in this range. And remember, we're doing this analysis based on Bitcoin that has been bought or sold from the prior all-time high. So we're looking back here to November, right? So we're looking back right to this time when we were at around 69K. So where did these coins, or, where have they come from? Why have these coins kind of moved right in this range? And the most likely explanation for this that I can come up with is that these coins were moved during these liquidation events. So you had liquidations at around 27K, then you had liquidations at 25K, then you had liquidations at around, 25.5, and then 25, and then, all the way down to around 24. So these coins were in all likelihood moved during liquidation events and perhaps some sort of, over-the-counter sale, something like that. And, that's whenever we have these huge wicks like this, these tend to be during times where people are being liquidated. Now, if we just include that group and then look at Bitcoin that were held up to around here, that's where we get to almost around, 0.8 million Bitcoin. So almost a million Bitcoin were purchased or acquired during this stage of the market. And that was, again, a short number of days. We're only talking about 34 or 35 days that we were there. Now we then have another group here, right? So we're talking from 35K up to around 53K. So this is going to be by far our biggest segment. And you'll see that not a lot of coins were actually acquired during this upper end of this band. They were mostly acquired up to around 44K. So from around 33K up to around 44K, a huge number of Bitcoin were acquired. In fact, we're looking at around 1.82 million Bitcoin. Now, this harkens back to the 2018 cycle. We know that we're in a downtrend. We know that we're moving down, but it's probably still a good idea if you're a long-term investor to be acquiring during these stages, because you never know if you're going to get a big turnaround. Like we said, we don't speak in absolutes. So while we expect that we're going to go down to the realized price, down to the 200-week, 100-week moving average, etc., we don't know. So it makes sense to be dollar cost averaging into the market in small amounts. All right. So once a week, I was acquiring Bitcoin in small amounts during these stages of the market because, if you look at the DCA index risk model during these stages of the market, according to the way that I acquire Bitcoin, it made sense for me to be acquiring in this range. Now that we're down here, according to the DCA index risk model, I'm acquiring much more. So using some sort of dynamic dollar cost averaging approach makes a lot of sense. And so while we were down here, while we were at 40K, while we were at 30K, I was acquiring small amounts of Bitcoin, acquiring a bit more in this range down here, closer to 30K. And now that we're down to 20K, I'm acquiring much more. Okay. Not quite the highest risk level that we're in, but we're one tier above. We're still in that 10 to 20 range. So in that range, I will keep acquiring Bitcoin according to the dynamic dollar cost averaging schedule. By the way, if you're interested in the DCA index risk model, that's a machine learning algorithm model that you can download or sign up for anyway on the Discord channel. It's a free trading view indicator. It's a machine learning model which helps you to identify where market cycle peaks and bottoms occur. So what am I getting at here? What's the big picture? What are we looking at? Well, the last group is, let's take a look at the last group first. And, there were around 0.6 million Bitcoin that were acquired during this time. And when I say acquired, I'm talking about that they bought and they're still holding. Okay. So they bought and they have not sold. In that last demographic that we looked at, those were people that have sold at some point during this market cycle following this prior all-time high. So we hit the all-time high and are moving down. Now we want to know, where have people been acquiring at during this downtrend? All right, so we see by and large, the largest number of holders are coming from this range right here. So we have nearly 2 million Bitcoin have been purchased kind of in this range, right? And then we have almost 2 million that were purchased right in this range. But remember, this is going to be a lot of short-term traders. So we are seeing that there's quite a bit of acquisition occurring right in this range, but at least a good portion of that is going to come from short-term traders and cannot be thought of as being, new Bitcoin that people are buying and holding. All right. So what is the significance then of this range, the people who have bought in this range? And we're talking about from around 33 up to around 43. Well, the significance of it is that these people are now sitting on a fair size loss. So, per Bitcoin that they have bought, on average, if we just look at this entire group of people, we can say that, if 33 is the bottom and 44 is the top, we can say that somewhere around 38 or so, 39, that's kind of their average cost of all of these people. So per Bitcoin that any one of these individuals is holding, we can say that they are now sitting on a $19,000 loss. All right. So they are sitting at loss of around 19K. And what happens is, if you start to see that the price goes down farther from here, let's say we go down to 10K, then they fall into that category of people that are down greater than 50% on their investment. And, being that a lot of these people may be newer investors, we can't with any certainty say that they are, but once we fall down sort of below those ranges, then they become a risk for capitulation. And if you remember, we have 2 million Bitcoin sitting right here. Okay, so 2 million Bitcoin each sitting at around, on average, a $19,000 loss. All right, so I could do the math out for you, but it's not pretty. Let's put it that way. So these guys then become a capitulation risk. All right. Now, so far we've seen that, there hasn't been a huge amount of selling in this range, but there's been a fair amount. And if we just come back to this chart here, right? If you just come back to this chart, you'll see that, there has been a decent amount of selling coming from this range. Now, it hasn't been huge, but if things really started to get ugly from here, then this could quickly snowball. All right. And then these values could start to reflect much closer to the 68, 64, 65K Bitcoin capitulation. The big picture here, this is telling us that everything is looking kind of like a normal bear market. We're seeing that the selling's coming from the top down. The people who bought right at the top, they're capitulating, and then we're seeing it form in waves where, as we move down further, you're seeing people that, bought at 50K, 40K, 30K, they will continue to capitulate. Another point to make here is that these people, as we start to come up, as we start to come into this level here, and more specifically in this level here. So realistically, the level that I'm most worried about is going to be right in this range. As we start to come into this range, so we're talking anywhere from around 30K up to around 40K, you're going to see that these people are going to present a significant resistance level. So it's going to be kind of tough to move through some of these levels. So 30K all the way up to around 40K, because we have a large number of holders there. All right. So for any true rally to occur, you're going to have to see one of two things. Either we drop down further and then get a large capitulation from the individuals holding in this level. So specifically, we're talking about this level right here, and you can just look on the graph over here and see where all these Bitcoin are held. You have to get through these people. So the way to get through them is to either A, have a capitulation event where, a huge number of these people end up selling, or B, you're going to have to just have a massive wave of buying which comes in and is able to break through this resistance level. And, if we don't have another capitulation event, it's very likely that we'll probably get rejected off somewhere between this 30K up to around 40K zone for quite some time. I think it could be difficult, especially in the low liquidity environment that we're in right now, to break through this zone right here, because there's just a huge number of Bitcoin being held in those levels. And people, as we come back up to their cost basis, they're going to be very happy to get out at even, especially when they've been down 50% or greater for months and potentially years, because this bear market that we're in right now could be protracted and it could last all the way through 2022 and into 2023, if not beyond. That's kind of what I'm looking at, guys. These are going to be the very important levels to watch into the future. And also, if we start moving down, it's going to be important to continue to watch this metric, because we'll be able to see, or we need to know if these people are capitulating. And specifically, we'll want to know, are those people that have been holding for 10 years plus, 7 years plus, are those guys starting to capitulate? Is something changing in the dynamic of Bitcoin in the cryptocurrency market that's causing those people to sort of evacuate the market? Or is it going to be like we're currently seeing, where the people who bought up at the top are capitulating from the top down? And if that continues to be the case, the price may go lower, but that's nothing to be surprised by or shocked by or scared by, because it happens in every single market cycle. So as per usual, I believe that 20K, 19K, 25K, these are presenting you with excellent buying opportunities. Potentially we do go down, perhaps 10K. I don't expect that we will, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. And I'll be exploring some of the support levels that we have below us in a future video. But for now, guys, that's what I'm watching, and that's going to be it for this one. Until next time, as usual, see you.